Good morning. Thanks for coming, folks. Kind of got the word that you guys would prefer if we didn't do a long opening statement and talk about our stuff, so we're just going to jump right into it, and you can talk about what you want to talk about. I'll just say it's day 30, halfway out. I'm going to predict we're done in 60 days. I think the Democrats can take your guns and raise your taxes and be gone in 60 days, so we're all out of here. Mark, I'll introduce Joyce Alexander.
Joyce McDonald.
McDonald,
That's all
excuse
right.
me.
I know that's
I did
all
that
right.
this morning, and I'll give it to Mark.
I like the name. It's my
family.
It's a family.
I think the important thing to remember on Ronald Reagan's birthday is we celebrate the 4th of July. The other side celebrates April 15th. So with me is Senator Sharon Brown and Senator Doug Erickson.
Wow, you wanted us to talk for a half hour, right?
Well, we're a little bit used to longer statements. I'm wondering what the Republicans think of the governor's comments yesterday on fighting the Trump administration's plans for offshore oil drilling off the coast of Washington State. Do you agree that the state should take action from lawsuits to other restrictions to prevent offshore oil drilling?
The solution to everything is to sue. If you're in people's faces often enough, they're going to push back. You know, a adult conversation between the Attorney General and the administration, rather than the 30th lawsuit of the administration, would probably help.
The Senate Democrats have been celebrating the number of bills that they've passed off the Senate floor, in the first month or so here, and saying, well, Republicans didn't do that many bills in this time frame last year. What's your reaction to that?
We've always been more concerned about quality than quantity of legislation and the ability to pay for it.
Continuing on Jim's question, do the two caucuses here, do you support offshore drilling off the coast of Washington? Is that a good thing, bad thing? Who cares, or what?
We have a mixture of viewpoints in our caucus, John, but the reality of it is, why is a lawsuit the first action by our state? And what activities are being taken away that the Attorney General's office should do for hardworking taxpayers in the state because they've filed their 30th or so lawsuit against the other administration?
Well, they haven't actually filed a lawsuit yet. They just said that that's an option. Are you saying that's not an option?
Well, I think the underlying premise here is what's the most appropriate expenditure of taxpayer resources? Does it make sense to just keep suing, or does it make sense to sit down and try and come to some form of an agreement?
Well, Bob Ferguson's got a pretty good track record right now. It seems like fairly effective.
No, he's not effective. He's effective in filing the suits.
Yeah.
And that's my point. Is that an effective resource for the state of Washington? The filing of lawsuits.
One of the issues you guys keep in mind also on this whole idea of offshore drilling in Washington State, I know of no company that's expressed any interest in drilling off of Washington's coast. Nobody has found any oil reserves on the coast out here, so I think it's a bit of a PR stunt by the Attorney General to be out suing again.
Does it make sense for the administration to open up the coast of Washington if nobody's interested in drilling out there?
Well, if there's no oil, what difference does it make if you open it up or not? I mean, Washington State is not a place with a lot of natural energy reserves. They've looked in eastern Washington. We haven't found very much. And to my knowledge, there are no coastal reserves off the Washington coast.
To the lawmakers in the House, there's a bill that would aim to eliminate the fees people are charged if they want to freeze their credit reports, like with Equifax. And I'm just curious, the bill has already passed the Senate. I was curious to get your thoughts on what you think about it, if you think it has a good chance in the House.
I haven't seen it. When it gets over here, we'll take a look. I don't know, Joyce, if you've seen that, but I'm not familiar with that.
I have. I think actually there's a bill that was already did pass the floor of the House that did just that. I don't know if it's exactly the same as the bill you're talking about from the Senate, but we did one last week that allowed people to freeze, and there was, I believe, no cost involved in that.
So this is day 30. We had cut off last week for policy. Today is cut off for financial bills, budget bills. Are there bills that you think are great that they died, and bills that you think are the best bills that have come out and are still alive?
Well, I think the only bill that is memorable is the Hearst fix. After that, none of them are game changers for people's lives in this state.
Can you go more in depth on that? Just curious.
Well, Hearst decision was a positive impact for all 39 counties. It included some start on foster. I mean, that is significant in how we manage a resource and how we're able to build affordable family housing across the state. That's something that cuts across all lines and was surely the most important thing we've done to date.
Of course, that bill's passed. My question was about cutoff and bills that are still alive or bills that are dead.
2312 is one that a lot of us are interested in. It's a DeBolt bill on rural broadband. Huge challenge. We've got high unemployment, low personal incomes. Part of the problem when we try and attract different businesses is, we've got a lot of things going for us, but there's usually not that good broadband. And the state has spent money to get it out in rural areas, but they haven't figured out a way to get it off of Main Street. And this bill will be looking at that. I think it would be a huge economic impact into the underserved areas. It's always what we run into is companies looking to relocate or move in. They need that good, fast, high-speed internet, and it's been a huge problem. So I'm hopeful on that.
Is there a big cost on that?
Yeah, big cost on it. And it comes out of the BSA account, which concerns me. The positive is that it is paid back over time, and I think if you look at it as an investment, I think it's one of those few that actually would pay dividends.
I think on the negative side of that, Jim, there is a broadband bill in the Senate that doesn't do a whole lot to begin with. And now there's an amendment in Ways and Means to take the money out of it. So what's left? A permanent bureaucrat in the Commerce Department, and Kitsap County can retail through a PUD, but for the rest of the state, the puny amount of money that in it is gone, and it really doesn't do much except grow Bondlander's empire.
I'm going from memory on this, and I could be very easily wrong, but I want to say that DeBolt's bill have about a $300 million appropriation in it. And, is your side happy with it, considering you're the side that doesn't like to spend money?
Well, it's kind of strange. It gets paid back. That's part of the bill. Unusual concept in Olympia. But yeah, I am concerned about that kind of a budget hit. It's huge. And I'm concerned about using the BSA account. But that is the difference on this one is the money as revenue improves in the most impoverished parts of the state, the money comes back to the BSA and is made whole.
Is that out of approach yet?
I don't think, it's in approps now, yeah.
Oh, it's got to
Yeah,
come to you.
yeah, right.
There's been a number of bills related to unions and things like that in the legislature. Particularly, there was one about exempting birth dates and matching names of state employees. There was also one, I think Senator Braun put out a memo about, I think it was 6199 related to union dues and healthcare workers and things like that. I'd just be curious your all thoughts on, Senate Democrats are now in charge, and whether you think some of that legislation that the unions have been pushing for might get through, and your thoughts on that?
Well, two thoughts. First of all, we're celebrating Labor Day for the 30th straight day now. The second thought is I agree with the editorial boards of the papers on birth date release.
More broadly, is there, I guess, less broadly, or what would you like to see instead? When you say Labor Day, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think we've seen union bills introduced and progressing every day for 30 days. Normally, the public just celebrates Labor Day once a year.
Outside of the birth dates bill, are there any that you take particular exception to, and why?
Well, I don't see any particular need for any of them. We've got along fine. We're one of the most heavily unionized states in America. Why do we need more?
Do you see the federal Janus decision upcoming as the reason for some of these happening, and anybody else is welcome to weigh in as well.
Well, definitely. I think that the public sector unions are very nervous about the Supreme Court ruling the Janus decision, and they are very fearful that they won't be able to hold their members if the court rules that you don't have to be a member of that public employee union, whether you're a school teacher or whether you're a county employee or a city employee or a state worker. And I think what the Democrats are trying to do is to make it more difficult for those people to find out what their rights will be after this Supreme Court potential decision happens. And that's the concern I have about it. They're trying to prevent the people that are in these unions from being able to know their rights in the future should the Supreme Court rule in a certain way on the Janus decision.
$10 per ton carbon tax, is that more palatable to you guys?
First of all, John, it's not a $10 a ton carbon tax. It's an energy tax that grows annually. You never catch up. That's what it really is.
Yeah, just to highlight that, we heard that bill in committee the other day, and it's scaled back, slightly from the governor's proposal, saying governor started at $20 a ton and you grow it at inflation. This is a $10 per ton, which is a 10-cent gas tax increase out of the gate, which grows automatically to 30 cents on the people of Washington State. So it automatically grows to 30 cents. So it's essentially a 30-cent gas tax proposal. It also hits home heating very hard. And so if you're a person who drives a car and likes to heat your home, you're the person that pays the tax. Well, what I found incredibly interesting in the legislation is that they have over 56 separate corporate tax exemptions and loopholes built into this bill. They were giving out exemptions like candy on Halloween. I mean, it was crazy. You just show up at the door and knock, you seem to get an exemption or a carve-out or a loophole in this particular bill. They also give basically a free pass to the investor-owned utilities. While I'll have to pay more as a consumer, the utility pays nothing because they're able to recapture all the money they had to spend and put it back into investment in their grid. So I pay more, they don't. My favorite tax exemption is for a corporate jet fuel. So if you want to fly your corporate jet to the Bahamas to play golf, you don't pay any carbon tax. But if you want to drive your kids to school, you pay the carbon tax. Now, does that sound fair? It's very interesting. The other interesting part is the bill admits in the actual letters of the statute that will have a disproportionate impact on the working poor. So their solution is to charge middle-class people a tax and then take the money from the middle class and use that to pay the lower-end people to offset their car tabs and their energy fees. So they go to 200% of poverty. So if you're a family of four, and that makes about $50,000 a year, you get reduced car tabs and you get your energy increases paid for. If you make $55,000 a year, you don't. And you're the one then paying the tax and giving it to the person that makes just a couple $1,000s less than you do. I mean, it's just completely unfair the way it's structured. And the beauty of the whole thing is it does absolutely nothing for the environment. And so while we heard Governor Inslee get up on day 2 and give his State of the State address about starting his infamous climate clock countdown, 58 days to save Washington State from Armageddon and Book of Revelation type disasters, this does nothing. I mean, everybody you can ask anybody, it does absolutely nothing. The stat I heard recently was this could potentially lower world temperatures by 0.02%, which means zero. I mean, no impact. And so you hear flowing speeches about the wine valleys of Walla Walla, the snowpacks on Mount Baker, rivers flowing and forests burning. Zero impact. You could actually say, however, this could increase carbon production. Because what will happen because of legislation like this is companies that make aluminum, that make widgets, that make whatever, will eventually move their companies out of Washington State to China and make those products using coal and then ship them back to Washington State. So this makes absolutely no sense at all from whatever angle you look at it, unless your sole goal is to raise taxes on working families, which is pretty much the only people left paying taxes in this bill after all the exemptions.
And so I want to read to you guys specifically from the bill. Section 501 says the legislature finds that the increased energy expenses will have a disproportionate impact upon the finances of low-income households engaging in life-sustaining activities, including but not limited to heating, cooling, and transportation. So there you have it. By their own admission, they're really going after low-income families, and that's just unconscionable.
I would say low income and rural particularly. We've got the projections that the cost on a family in Seattle would be about $170 in the first year, moving up to over 500 by 2029. You got to stop and think. Those are people that are typically, driving a few blocks to work or taking, transit. We don't have those options. Most of my folks are driving, 30, 40, 60, 80, 100 miles to work. I would guess this $170 figure, I would probably pay that just going in and out of my driveway in a year. I've got a 3-mile long driveway. It's going to hammer rural parts of the state that are already low income and high unemployment, and it's going to hit families.
And if you want to presuppose that there really is an issue here, why aren't we talking about real solutions? Why are we not talking about nuclear, baseload sources of energy?
And I just always have to remind people that when we held the majority, we were the only caucus legislative chamber in Olympia to actually pass out a carbon reduction bill when we changed 937 to change it from a windmill bill to actually using those resources to go out and do weatherization of households, to convert diesel facilities to compressed natural gas and liquid natural gas type activities also. So, there are things we can do for the environment that will help people, lower particulates in the air. But this particular proposal does nothing except raise taxes, and raise taxes on a very, very narrow portion of our society. If you want to find a broad tax increase, this is the furthest thing from a broad and flat tax. This is a specifically targeted one that hits a smaller portion of our economy very hard.
So do you think those problems and other problems with the carbon tax will stall it at some point in the next 30 days?
Well, it certainly is a bit of a hypocrisy. Just a couple weeks ago, we were hearing a bill in Ways and Means to re-examine the nearly 600 tax exemptions on the books in the state of Washington. We've had and so the same person sponsored a bill with 56 new ones. There are no clawback provisions that those folks have proposed. There is no sunset on these tax exemptions, nor is there any formal review of the value through LEAP or other. So on one hand, tax exemptions are evil and they need all this scrutiny. On the other hand, if it's in the name of climate change, let it go. Now the hypocrisy is pretty deep here.
Well, and one other point I forgot to make, pardon me for jumping back in here, but the way this is structured with absolutely none of the money from this gas tax increase, the 30-cent gas tax increase going to roads to ease congestion, it totally and completely disrupts our current transportation infrastructure financing system in Washington State. So how do you have another gas tax increase in the future to pay for roads if you're doing a 30-cent gas tax increase to do nothing for roads? And I just saw the story today that Everett is the most congested region in the entire country. And here you have a proposal for a 30-cent gas tax increase that will do less than zero to help solve that problem, unless you're somehow able to get rid of a lot of good paying jobs by shipping them to Wyoming, and then I guess you'd have less congestion. But just think about that, 30-cent gas tax increase, worst congestion in the country, none of that money goes to improve traffic congestion.
Does the proposal become palatable if they were to put 100% of the money into roads and reducing emissions if they just was solely to go to that end?
You're still taxing those that are most vulnerable.
And I think you should look at Representative DeVolt's other bill that we didn't talk about today, which is 2283. And that bill just passed out of the Technology and Economic Development Committee with bipartisan support. And what it does is it expands the resources that qualify for clean energy, but it also establishes tax preferences for companies that actually want to move to clean energy resources. So it's an incentive bill. It doesn't raise taxes. It provides incentives. And we know that a lot of people, a lot of the companies out there would like to do that. And that to me is the carrot approach instead of the stick approach that really isn't affecting them the way it's affecting just families in Washington State. Another tax on families in Washington State, especially I know in my district, which is a part of ST3, the boundaries, and the people in my district are hurting with the increased taxes. So they're very, very concerned, and they expect us to look at things that actually will work, not just another slap in the hand and more taxes.
And just that one other thing I always remind people is Washington State currently has the highest carbon taxes in the country with our gas tax. So if Governor Inslee wants to have the highest carbon tax, hey, way to go. Our gas taxes are, I think, second highest in the country right now. So we're right up at the very top when it comes to that particular issue. And again, getting back to the point of roads are still in very bad shape, even with the highest energy carbon tax on our gasoline fuel in the country.
What kind of infrastructure investments would the Republican caucus like to see?
Well, I think we're a statewide caucus, we'd like to see a statewide infrastructure package. In some parts of the state, their transportation system is absolutely the most critical. In some places, it's water. In some places, it's broadband. We're a statewide caucus, and we look statewide, and there's issues to work on statewide, and punishing hardworking taxpayers is not part of our agenda.
Part of my frustration is why aren't we dealing with more of the substantive bills that we have out there that are actually job creation bills? That's what we need for the hardworking Washingtonians. We need to make sure that they have a job that they can go to.
What specific job creation are you talking about?
Same question.
We have the B&O tax exemption on manufacturing.
Which passed both the House and the Senate last year and was vetoed by Governor Inslee.
It's really, it's really pretty affordable. I was shocked at how small it really was, and it could have a positive result statewide. The other thing is the willingness of the sponsors to phase it in to meet the challenges of a budget. That's a conversation we should be having about a manufacturing job in Washington will produce less carbon than a manufacturing job in China, maybe even some of the other Western states.
Have you talked with Democratic leaders about that?
They've given it lip service so far.
I had a bill that I co-sponsored with a Democrat, the Invest in Washington Jobs Creation Act, which would give a sales and use tax deferral on manufacturers that came to the state of Washington or expanded their facilities in the state of Washington. That's going nowhere.
To go back to an earlier question, I just wanted to clarify, when you said about that credit freeze fee bill, did you mean to say it passed out of a committee or it passed?
No, passed through the floor of the House last week. I don't know you'd have to check the bill number, but yes.
I was just looking at it.
Is that the one that was put down for a minute while they were checking on an amendment? Were you there?
Well, I was looking on the ledge.wa.gov, and it said on February 2nd it passed, or on January 31st it passed out of the House Committee on Business and Financial Services and referred to rules, and I was wondering if that's what you meant when you meant to say
We did vote on a credit freeze bill last week on the floor. Yep. Do you remember that, John? Yeah, okay.
Well, we should have talked for 20 minutes, I guess. Huh?
We don't have lunch now before you have to go to Brooks.
That'd be wonderful.
Well, Ways and Means is meeting today. We'll see the outcome of a number of bills, but, going back to Senator Sheldon's broadband, which was very, very modest, the amendments there from the other side to take the pittance of money out of it. So what's there to get excited for? So, thank you.
Thank you.